And now back to your regular programming.
If you speak better to yourself.
You showed up for probably the dumbest conversation we've ever had on this show.
Let's have that smile again.
Tell me how that happens. Physically should not happen.
Relax.
If you say it
Give me as well.
3 times a day, God will line it up.
He's just an absolute hack, and he gets his ass kicked by the teammates every week. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to Hack City. I'm Joe DeLeone, and with me is my co-host and former teammate, Sean Anderson. Today we're doing another preview to help you get ready for the 2024 college football season. To talk about the Washington Huskies, a team that was in the College Football National Championship this past year. We've got Ben Glassmire, who is a contributor for Huskies Wire, and you can follow him on Twitter at Ben Glassmire NFL. Ben, appreciate you taking the time to join us, talk about the Huskies. Sean, you always get us a good opening question here. What do you got?
Ben, after seeing the rumblings of the Big 12 presented by Allstate, all that madness, what naming rights deal would Ben Glassmire want for himself? Sean Anderson would want to be presented by Mercedes, but I'd take Haynes Comfort Flex Fit.
Mercedes isn't presenting you.
Can I fit?
What?
God.
Who do you think?
We're just interrupting questions now. Bush Light would be great. I would settle for a Haynes Comfort Flex Fit. They're my favorite pair of underwear at the moment. Ben, what would you want to be presented by?
Oh gosh, what do I want to be presented by? I've been gaming a lot recently. So I'm going to be presented by Steam.
Okay.
Give me that. I want my video games for free.
Well, this podcast is with Ben Glassmire, presented by Steam. We'll use that the rest of the show. To actually get into talking about some football, man, it has been probably one of the strangest turnarounds for a team that Washington could have possibly had. They were in the national championship. They had a top 10 draft pick at quarterback in Michael Penix and a Heisman Trophy finalist, one of the best receivers in the country in Rome Odunze, as well as a litany of draft picks. Their head coach, Kalen DeBoer, leaves. He goes to Alabama, and now Jedd Fisch takes over, who they hired from the University of Arizona. I just think after all of that, Ben, what is the temperature right now? What is the expectation for Washington and the hope that they get back to where they were last year?
Yeah, I think right now, if you want to take the temperature, I feel like it's cautiously optimistic. I think, with the excitement from last year it's starting to wear off, but there's still that we were in a national championship. We can be at that level because they have been at that level previously. And then to kind of get back there with the team that they had. And obviously all the guys are gone. That's a huge factor. I want to say they're only returning 2 of the 22 starters on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, which is insane. But Jedd Fisch has done a really good job of retooling the roster, getting the guys that were available, keeping some of the guys that DeBoer had brought in, whether that's, Will Rogers to kind of steady the quarterback room, bringing Jonah Coleman from Arizona, bringing Ephesians Prysock from Arizona, getting those type of guys has kind of, maintained it. It's somewhat, they're obviously not going to be a national contender. They're not going to be even near that, but I think they're going to be better than, what TCU was when they got to that level that Washington got to. I think they will be better than TCU was following that.
Ben, what is your perspective on Washington State and Oregon State this year? And are there things you're going to miss about their traditional Pac-12 now that you're, moving on to newer things? I wouldn't dare call them better at this stage of the evolution.
Yeah. I'm just going to, we still get the Washington State game, so that is going to be great. They're going to play at CenturyLink. It's going to be a really cool atmosphere, I feel like, to kind of get the 2 teams keeping that tradition going. But it's just sad in that Washington State and the Washington State or Washington game is not going to mean as much. Like you saw last year, Washington, that game was
nuts.
Insane, nuts. Exactly. You won the game on a jet sweep to Rome Odunze, and that's what it took to win that game. When Washington State, nobody gave Washington State a chance going into that game. That game always was such an amazing game at the end of the season because one team was good, or when both teams were good, it was so much fun. And you had the Mike Leach years, you had all that type of stuff. But now it's just it's just going to be a non-conference game. It's still going to be cool because it's the 2 Washington teams, but it's sad that it's not going to mean as much to either team. It's not a conference game that's going to help determine things down the line. You're probably going to see, in the next few years, there's going to be a growing disparity between Washington and Washington State just because of the situations that they're in. So you're going to lose that competition between the two teams. I still think you'll have the relationship between the two fan bases, just the pure hatred towards each other. But in terms of that, I think that's just kind of the whole thing for the Pac-12 in general. Like, you're just losing all of those traditional relationships that teams had with each other.
It's still so random that these are the two idiots standing there holding hands with Oregon State and Washington State, that they're just randomly on the outside while everyone else is doing their own thing. And it's no one really talks about the rivalries. So that's really interesting to hear, what Wazoo is going to play into things with UW this upcoming year. Speaking on, and you talked about all of these guys that are shuffling in and out, and there might not even be an answer to this question, but who is the new, or who should be and could be by the end of the year, the face of the team? Who do you think is
that's a good question.
That guy that we're going to be talking about that represents Washington?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is one of the returning starters. It's Carson Bruner at linebacker. He kind of came on really late in the season last year after they just kind of had some attrition at linebacker and guys just weren't performing up to what they kind of expected. But Bruner came in and kind of like was their heart and soul. He's been talked about. Edafon Ulafosio, who was drafted by the Bills, talked about Bruner being like their next guy up, who was the guy that everybody in that locker room loves. They all rallied behind him. He was a big factor in bringing back, like, keeping a lot of the guys that DeBoer tried to poach going to Alabama. He was that like steadying force for the team when they were looking for a new coach. So I think he's not one that's definitely not known to a lot of people. But I think that the way he played at the end of the season and going into the national title in the Texas game, he will be really important for this year just because he's that captain of the defense. And as they implement Steve Belichick's scheme, it's going to be really important for him to kind of be that communicator for all the young guys and all the guys that end up getting reps this year.
Ben, what's the scorn level on Kalen DeBoer leaving? It's not my bully pulpit to yell about the Washington fan emotions, but you have to kind of feel like they're there, even if they're a little more subdued. Is there some just lying down like, oh, you took it here and now you're there? Yeah,
it hurt. It was a really rough, like, when that whole process was going, and there was a lot of coping, and even on my end, like in Washington fans' ends, but I think it's kind of died down a little bit. I think a lot of people who, at least the rational fans, understand that.
How are the dozen of them doing? They're doing good.
We're doing okay. We're doing all right. It's Alabama in the end. Like, you don't pass up Alabama. If that job comes open, you don't pass that up. And I think for DeBoer, it was such a good fit for him because at Washington, he did such a good job on the coaching aspect, but the recruiting aspect never really got there. And he wasn't there for long enough. So it's hard to fully judge that. But even like going into this season, the recruiting just wasn't really wasn't happening at a high level, especially for a team that was in the national championship. You kind of should expect that to translate to some success. So going to Alabama, where you have a little bit of a richer talent pool to draw from in the tradition and, all those things is going to help him mask that. But for Washington fans, I think it just hurt because we saw, what his offense looks like. We went from the Jimmy Lake years of like just horrible football, watching awful football week in and week out, to getting an offense where it's just so fun. It's so explosive. He does so many creative things. It just hurt to see that it was so short. Like, we got it for a little bit and now it's gone.
Speaking of coaches leaving, man, I can't believe I'm already like throwing this into the mix. And I'm sorry, Washington fans, I don't mean to be negative, but is there any fear of Jedd Fisch possibly leaving at some point? Because Florida is supposed to be opening up, and he is a Florida alum. Did not play football there, but was a Florida alum. And then he also has an NFL background. Is there any fear that either end, if things go really well, he could end up at either spot?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fear. For me, I think I had the fear hiring him, right? Like when they hired him, that like, God, he's going to be here for 1 year and then he's going to Florida when that job opens. I think that's cooled a little bit for me personally, and I think for a lot of people who have kind of been around the team. It seems like with the infrastructure that he's building and the coaches that they've gotten and the commitment from the school that they've gotten, that is going to kind of die down in terms of him leaving right after this season. And especially because I think the team is not going to be amazing this year. Like, if they win 8 games, that would be awesome. Like, if they can get to that mark, that would be incredible. But I don't think they get there. So I think the hype level on Jedd Fisch is going to be died down from where it was if he had stayed at Arizona and obviously had all the weapons that they had there. They probably could have won the Big 12, obviously. So I'm not paranoid that he's going to leave after this year. However, if you talk to me again in 3 years, I don't know that Jedd Fisch is going to be there after 3 years.
Is there a transfer portal addition for the Huskies that you're already focusing on and that fans should keep their eyes on for the upcoming season?
Yeah, so I have one on offense and defense. They're both Arizona guys, so I already talked about them. But Ephesians Prysock, the corner from Arizona, he's been my dude for, even when he was at Arizona, I was like all in on him as a player.
He's huge. He's enormous.
Like listed at 6'4". I think he's probably, he's in that range. He's very close to that 6'4". He's so long and so physical. I love watching him play, and we got to see him in spring practice, like working against some of the Husky receivers. It's a problem for any receiver to try to go up against him just because he's so long and he's so willing to get in your face. Offensively, Jonah Coleman, the running back from Arizona, he's a ball of power and anger that he runs with. It's so fun to watch. And I think a lot of those guys, you kind of just think of them as power backs. He's a really good receiver as well. And that's going to be a big part of the offense. They've already talked about that being really important for a quarterback like Will Rogers and potentially freshman DeMond Williams. Just having that outlet valve that they've got in their offense, they really value that.
So you bring up DeMond Williams and then also Will Rogers. What's the expectation level for the quarterback room? Is there confidence that Roger, obviously he's not going to be Michael Penix, but is there confidence that he can elevate a completely reshaped offense? And at the same time, what is the desire and maybe the hope that DeMond Williams gets on the field? Because he showed some nice stuff in the spring game. He didn't look ready, but is there maybe a desire to get him onto the field?
Yeah, I think Rodgers, I wouldn't use the word elevate the offense. I would more use the term, like, I've said it a couple times, but like steadying. Just like they're bringing in so many guys that haven't played together before, and the whole offensive line is going to be 5 new starters that who've, again, never played together before. I think just having a guy who's thrown for so many yards, thrown so many passes, been in college for so long, having someone with that veteran leadership who can kind of just bring everybody together, steady the ship as they implement a new offense. There's going to be things that happen in the first couple games that are going to be bad. Like the offensive line is not going to be awesome. I think just having a guy who knows what to do in those situations where he's not going to offer this dynamic, presence in the offense, but he's just going to steady it and keep things together and help run the offense the way that they want to. But I also think on the flip side, that's going to open the door for DeMond Williams to potentially see the field because we saw what Will Rogers was last year. He was not the best. Like, it was not always pretty. And granted, it wasn't always his fault, but there definitely were things that were his fault. So if you have a guy like DeMond Williams and the season isn't going, as planned, you're dropping games early in the season, I think getting him on the field can't hurt because he's so talented that he's shown things that Will Rogers can't show just in terms of athleticism and being able to work outside the pocket. If the offense isn't at par and the offensive line is just struggling, maybe getting DeMond Williams in the game will just kind of help solve some of those things because he can just do so many more things with his legs.
Ben, could you indulge me for a second here? Michael Penix Jr. was drafted to the Atlanta Falcons this season, and this is a franchise that I have rooted for since I was 7 years old. Never missed a game. They've had some news this offseason that they've just had some news. Can you give me a Michael Penix Jr. pep talk to get me fired up about having him on the franchise that I love? I need a bit of a pep talk.
Yeah. He is the guy that everybody loves. Like, every single person that you talk to around UW, whether that was, journalist, player, anybody, they loved him. They raved about his character and how good he was as a leader, how he elevated the team from, a team that wasn't expected to really, kind of compete in the Pac-12, but to a national contender and that compete at the level that they were at. He is just raved about in every way. He was so clutch for Washington this year. They had so many close games where they wouldn't have won without him and without the contributions that he was able to make, the throws that he's willing to make, the windows he's willing to test, the trust he has in his receivers. I think that just the way that he carries himself and that he worked within the offense that he was put in is something that can translate so well. And, it's hard to figure out how he's going to translate to the NFL because there's just a lot of questions surrounding his game, whether that's injuries or accuracy, anything like that. I just think that if I want to bet on a guy to succeed, it's a guy with those intangible leadership traits, just because guys that play with him love him so much.
Don't give
Starting
Sean
to
hope.
feel it.
Don't
I know.
give Sean
I know.
Feel it in the air.
Yeah.
Oh, let's go.
I don't like it when Sean is a hopeful individual. Last question I got for you, Ben, before we get out of here. Freshman, if there was a freshman, first year, second year guy that you think explodes onto the scene, who do you think it could be?
That is a good question. I would say Damon Williams. That's too easy. So I'm going to go with Adam Muhammad is their 3-star running back. He's out of Arizona. He actually, so when I watched his high school film, I was like, gosh, this dude is like skinny, but he runs hard, and he played at a lower level of competition. So I was like, okay, like he'll be good in a couple of years. But he showed up to Washington at spring practice, and he was rocked up. He was huge. Like, he is like pure muscle, ripped, and he was running so hard. It's going to be tough for him to get on the field, I think, with Jonah Coleman and Cam Davis. But if there's anyone that can get on the field with the way that he looks and the progress that he made between, high school senior to college freshman, it's him, because he looks like a Greek god. Like, he came in and he looks like a Greek god. It's like he's going to be such a special player, I feel like.
Well, we know Fisch gets the best out of his running backs. We'll see what the Huskies do this season. Ben, thank you so much, folks. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Glassmire NFL on Twitter. Ben, anything you want to plug or promote that you're working on right now that's maybe coming up, some of the work you're doing with the Husky Wire?
There's going to be some news. There's going to be a lot of recruiting news in the next couple weeks on Huskies, just in terms of them getting some guys in. So I'm going to be working through that. So drop me a follow and keep an eye on that.
Of course. Thanks so much, Ben.